So for these first ones here, if you notice the next column, it says to write it as a positive exponent, but those already are positive exponents. So these are going to be exactly the same. So that's still going to be 2 to the 4th, 2 to the 3rd, 2 squared, 2 to the 1st, 2 to the 0. Okay. So let's figure out what their values are going to be. What is 2 to the 4th power? 16. 2 to the 3rd, 8. 2 to the 4th, 2 to the 1st, and 2 to the 0, 1. So those are our values. The negative exponents, those are the new ones. So what I would like you to try to do in your calculator is type in 2 to the negative 1 power. Let's see what we get. 0.5. So let's turn that into a fraction. So push the math button and then hit enter, enter. So our value for this is 1/2. Let's try the next one, 2 to the negative 2. Yeah.
Isn't it like always 1 over?
Yes, it is. So 2 to the negative 3 and 2 to the negative 4. So as positive exponents, this one would be written as 1 over 2 to the positive 1. And then this would be 1 over 2 to the positive 2. 1 over 2 to the positive 3. And then 1 over 2 to the positive 4. So when you have negative exponents, what happens is they create fractions. A lot of people have it kind of set in their minds that if you have negative exponents, that's going to give you a negative number. But that's not true. It creates a fraction. And so it just becomes 1 over whatever the value is. And then your exponent is positive. So let's see if you can fill in the 3's over there on the right side. So I'll give you a minute. See if you can do that one on your own. So here are the values you should have had. Again, it kind of repeats the pattern. When it's 3 to the positive 4, it's 81. But if it's 3 to the negative 4, it becomes 1 over 81. So it still has the 81 there because 3 to the 4th is 81. But your negative exponent just makes it the fraction, 1 over 81. Same thing with your 3 to the 3rd. You get 27, but once you make that exponent negative, it becomes 1 over 27. So when you see it like this, it's a little easier to see the pattern. You're not always going to want to write the pattern out, though, when you're given various problems throughout our math class. So there's a couple of different ways to try to explain this. So I'm going to explain it using both the methods that I know are pretty easy, and then you just go with whichever one makes it easier for you. So our 5 is always over a 1, right? Every whole number is over 1. We just don't always write that over 1 because we get lazy. So one way that it helps people to remember what to do is if you have a negative exponent, you just have to move it to the other part of the fraction. So this 5 to the negative 2 is in the numerator. To make it a positive 2 exponent, I need to move it down to the denominator. So once I move that 5, though, what's left up top? You always need that placeholder. You always got to have a placeholder of at least 1 up there. So we get the 1 up there, and then this becomes 5 to the positive 2. Now normally we would clean this up and write it as 1 over 25, but right now we're just practicing writing it using positive exponents, so we're not going to take care of that right now. So for our second one, again, I would write that as being over 1. Since my 3 has a negative exponent, I would want to move it down here. So I get 1 over 3 to the positive 7. Now the other way that some people like to look at this is, let's look at our third one. We got r to the negative 3, so I still put it over my 1. Some people like to think of it as you're flipping the fraction. So when you have your negative exponent, you end up flipping it. So if I flip this fraction, it becomes 1 over r to the positive 3. So you still get the same answer, whichever way you want to look at it. You're more than welcome to. So now for the next part, they want us to write each fraction as an expression using negative exponents. So we're going to practice going the other way. We have a positive exponent. We want to make it negative. So how would I write number 4? 10 to the negative 6. It's positive 6 in the bottom, so I want to make it negative 6. Huh? You do use tens to exponents in scientific notation, but this is not specifically it. All right, how about for 5? How would we write 5? 4 to the negative 8. And then 6, d to the negative 5. All right, let's try some harder ones on the back. So up top in that box, I just have that rule that we were talking about. If you have a base, remember a base is just anything with an exponent on it, so it could be a number, your base could be a letter. But when you have that base raised to the negative exponent, it has to move down into the denominator, and then your exponent becomes positive. It does go the other way also. Let's say I had the example 1 over x to the negative 3. And it was negative down in the denominator. How do you think we would make that positive? We would do it by moving that to up to the top. So it would become x to the positive 3 over 1. But would I have to write the over 1? No. So I would just leave it as x to the 3rd. So it goes both ways. So if your negative exponent is up in the top of the fraction, you want to move it to the bottom. If your negative's in the bottom, you want to move it up to the top. Kind of. Yeah. So then I have here, to simplify a negative exponent, you have to move it to the opposite side of the fraction and make the exponent positive. So that means top goes to bottom, bottom goes to top. So with a negative exponent, anything in a numerator moves to the denominator. And it becomes positive. So my example for that would be y to the negative 7 becomes 1 over y to the positive 7. So my y to the negative 7 was in my numerator, because remember it's over a 1, so I moved it down to the denominator and it became positive. And then it does go the other way, as I was saying. Anything with a negative exponent, if it's in your denominator, it moves to your numerator. And it becomes positive when it moves. So as an example of that, if I had 1 over 3 to the negative 2, that would become 3 to the positive 2. And then again, it would be over 1, but you don't have to write the over 1. So let's try some examples. So the first one right now is 4 to the negative 5th. So I'm going to put it over 1. So that means my 4 needs to move down here. So it becomes 1 over 4 to the positive 5th. And our directions didn't say that we were just writing it with a positive exponent. So we got to actually figure out what is 4 to the 5th power. So this is 1 over 1024. I hope you're right. Somebody check them. Please. Please. You typed it in your calculator. All right, so looking at number 2, we have 1 over x to the negative 2. So my negative exponent is in the bottom this time, so I need to move it where? Up top. So this becomes x to the positive 2. It would be over 1, but again, we don't have to write the over 1. So it would just be x squared. Our third one, 7 to the negative 2, is in the denominator, so it moves where? Up top. So that would become 7 to the positive 2, and again, it would be over 1, but I don't have to write that part. So we just have to figure out what is 7 squared. 49. So for number 4, we got the xy inside the parentheses, and then it's raised to a negative 5 power. So that means the negative 5 exponent goes to both the x and it goes to the y. So really what we have here is x to the negative 5th over y to the negative 5th. So now let's take care of our negative exponents. So my x would have to move down there to become positive. And where would the y have to move? Up to the top. So this becomes y to the 5th over x to the 5th. And that would be our final answer for that one. So number 5, we got a b to the negative 1 over 9. So what needs to move? The b. Now when we move that, we got to put our placeholder of 1 up top. The 9 didn't move. The 9 is still in the denominator, so this just becomes 9b to the positive 1. So the b just joined the 9 down there in the bottom. But again, we don't have to write that exponent of 1, so you could just write it as 1 over 9b. And that would be your final answer. Not everything moves. Only the things with the negative exponents move. So like for number 6, I'm going to go ahead and put my over 1 there. The negative exponent is on the what? The 3, the x, or both? Not both. Just the x. So the only thing that's going to move is the x. The 3 stays up top. So it becomes 3 over x to the positive 7. Now they both would have moved if there were parentheses around it. So like that means that the negative 7 is on both the 3 and the x. But since there weren't any parentheses, it means it's just on the x. All right, so for number 7, again, I put my over 1. So I got 5 to the 3rd times a to the negative 8. So what am I going to move? The 5 or the a? The a, because that is the only thing that has a negative exponent. 5 to the 3rd, that's already positive, so that's going to stay up top. So that's going to stay there. A to the 8th moves down to the bottom. So then we just have to finish cleaning it up and figure out what 5 to the 3rd power is. 125. So 8, we have to use our power to power rule that we learned last time. So this negative 5 here is going to go to both the x and to the y. And remember, when you got those two exponents, your power to a power, you got to multiply them. So 2 times negative 5 gives me x to the negative 10th. And then negative 1 times negative 5 gives me y to the positive 5th. Yep, so we just got to move the x. X is the only thing with a negative exponent, so that moves. So we get y to the 5th over x to the 10th. All right, and our last one. Again, we got to do our power to a power rule first. So this negative 3 is going to go to the 6, it's going to go to the x, and it's going to go to the y up top. But it's also going to go to all 3 parts of the denominator also. It's going to go to that 2, it's going to go to that other x, and that other y. So you got to do the exponent rule lots of times. So first we would get 6 to the negative third. Multiplying our x's, 3 times negative 3 gives us x to the negative 9. And then negative 2 times negative 3 would give us y to the 6th. So that's our numerator. For our denominator, we would have 2 to the negative 3. Multiply our x's, negative 2 times negative 3 gives me x to the 6th. And then 4 times negative 3 gives me y to the negative 12. So now we have a couple of different ways we can go from here. Well, let's practice our negative exponent rule. So let's do that way. So this 6 would have to move down, and the 2 would move up. This x would move down, and that y would move up. So since this 2 moves up top, that becomes 2 to the third. My 6 moves down, so I get 6 to the third in the bottom. So as I said, this x to the negative 9 moves down here, and that other x is still down there. That didn't move. And then the y to the 6th is still up top, and this y to the 12th joins it up top. All right, so now we got to clean things up a little bit. 2 to the third is what? 8. 6 to the third can give us what? 216. So just cleaning up those exponents. 8 over 216. Can we reduce that? Yeah, what would that reduce to? Do 8 divided by 216, math, enter, enter. That will always reduce your fractions for you. 127. Not really. All right, so now this goes back to last class. Up top, I have y to the 6th times y to the 12th. What do I do with those exponents? Add them. So we get y to the 18th. Down here, we have x to the 9th times x to the 6th. So we get x to the 15th. There's our final answer. That one was a longer one.